Bill, are you all set with attendance?
Yes, I am. You may start.
Okay. Starting with communications, has anybody heard anything from DEEP that we need to know about? Got a lot of head shaking now. Jeff?
Yeah,
Just continue to talk with them deep about the status of the review of the Eversource permit application. So that's not, we shouldn't anticipate a public notice about the tentative determination to approve that right away. They still have more review to do. But one interesting thing that I learned is that DEEP intends to require Eversource to post a performance bond for the work to cover any inadvertent spillage of the drilling fluids during the operation. And I think that's significant with respect to protecting shellfish resources and water quality. And it sets a precedent, I think, for other permit conditions that we might want to discuss, including mooring permit conditions to protect shellfish. But I had not known that. So that DEEP now has a standard that's based, the amount of the performance bond is based on the linear feet of the directional drill. But their DEEP is updating that amount now. So in the past, I forget what it was per linear foot, but they anticipate that amount will be increased. I thought that was an interesting condition to learn about. But I think that's about the only communication I've had. We've also communicated with DEEP about the status of DEEP's review of the proposed amendment to the POCD that affects well, among other things, Water Street and the coastal floodplain. And as far as we're aware now, that letter is still being developed and it's not been provided yet from DEEP to the planning and zoning authorities. I think those are the two main things. Thank
Jeff,
you.
correct me if I'm wrong, and with the collective minds we have here, I thought in one of the presentations from Eversource, I had questioned the coolants that they were using, and they said they were not going to use coolants. Anybody else remember that?
I remember that, Joe, but I don't know the details of the technology of the directional drill. All I can say right now is that we've been informed that DEEP intends to require that performance bond to cover any. So I don't know what the drilling, I don't know the details of what's being proposed. But again, that's something we'll have another opportunity to review at such time as it goes out to public notice.
Okay. From the Department of Agriculture or the Health Department, have we heard anything about the status of Vibrio?
No, there haven't been any notifications of any additional Connecticut cases, but there was a CDC advisory that went out this week regarding the concern for the increased number of cases due to coastal warming that's likely to happen.
Yep.
So it's something that need to be a little more conscious of going forward.
Okay. And Harbor Commission, anything else you want to clue us in on, Jeff?
Well, also, I know it's later on in your agenda, but I think a matter of interest for all of us is the proposal by the DOT to improve or to work on the intersection of Route 7 and the Merritt Parkway, which can have a significant impact on water quality in the Norwalk River and therefore downstream in the harbor.
Yes, indeed.
That's an agenda item for later, I know.
Right. Okay, planning and zoning. Has anybody heard anything from them that we need to be aware of? Okay.
I got a goodie for you, Joe.
Go ahead.
There's a sampling study for PFAS from Weston and Sampson, just put out in June 2023. I got it from Ralph Kolb. It is 3,600 pages long. And the DEP has been all over the mid part of our state. They have gone to every sewage treatment plant. They've tested the influent and the effluent twice. They've tested sludge. They've tested the waters on 5 counts, upstream and downstream. They've done a fish study. They've done independent well elite relief. And I can go on and on. I've been trying to get through this thing. I'm taking out the relevant graphs and I'll sit down with you and show some of them to you. You won't believe it. 3,600 pages. And it's very, very fine print. You need your magnifying glass.
Cutting to the chase, any idea how Norwalk did?
As far as PFAS?
Yeah.
Our sewage treatment plant comes in somewhere near the middle. You have a very high end was as you would suspect with Bridgeport, a very low end with Danbury, and everything in between. And that's all laid out in graphical form.
Okay.
Every flavor of PFAS that went through there. They found 19 species in the fish. They initially started out to examine 36 species in the report. They found 23 species in the sewage treatment plants. But I can get into that in more detail. There's a lot of detail.
Excellent, thanks. Anything else,
Hello.
Diane, on the sewage treatment plant tour?
I reached out to Ralph Kolb and I was asking him about just some general things like whether people should be flushing wipes down and whether they had problems with those flushable wipes. And then I also thanked him for putting together a tour. However, he and I talked and I explained to him that many of us couldn't handle a 4 or 5 hour visit, but if we could break, and I also thanked Dick Harris, if we could break it into 2 different sojourns, that might be doable with more of us. And so he mentioned, I will forward an email I just found that he sent me about, he said after October, when certain things are freed up, they have some reports to do, and the DPW is having their open house where they will give tours, but he said he'd be happy to have a tour of our group and any other entity like Shellfish or Harbor after October. And he'd like our help in organizing it, and I'm happy to do that. So anyway, I will forward that email to all of you, and we could maybe give him a range of dates that are good for the collective we. For just the DPW treatment plant tour, and then maybe offline with Dick. I think the thing that was planned with the blooms was beautiful. It was just, I know there wasn't a good response.
I got the same email, and it's a genuine offer, and I think that we ought to try to put something together.
I agree.
Yeah, just break it up into possibly two separate events or shortened events. 4 or 5 hours with our group is a lot for, at one point. It's I think, and that's, Ralph said he understood that. So anyway, that's, maybe for next month, we'll have a better idea.
Well, Diane, just to help you along here, is there a day of the week that is better for everybody here? If we could schedule that. How does anybody have a problem with Mondays? Tuesdays?
No.
Okay,
No.
Steve, Tuesday, and John. How about Wednesdays?
No problem.
Okay, and Thursdays?
Same.
Okay. So Diane, on Fridays, I forgot Friday.
Friday's fine.
Okay, so Tuesdays and Thursdays look like the hiccup days. So Diane, we're looking at Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays as a possible day to schedule that.
Okay, so I'll follow up and then we'll throw out times.
Yep.
also, I could do a doodle poll to everyone, which is kind of fun. But anyway, thank you for that.
Okay, so we're getting underway here. Okay, next item. Diane, anything on the directory, or are you saying it's not worth it at this point?
All I wanted to say is I have spoken to and reached out to Planning and Zoning and also Bill Mooney, and I'm collecting their complaint forms, if you will, and speaking especially with the zoning people as to what happens when they're not in the office. Who does a spill or zoning violation go? Who does the public call if they see something? And also I will be including the state spill phone numbers, and the police I know take a lot of calls after hours of City Hall. And so I don't have anything set yet, so I'm still working on it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, new business, here we go. Potential zoning changes. There's still intent on multiple family housing on Water Street. And the conflict with developing on sites known for hazardous waste. Now, Jeff, you said you had a newspaper article or a photograph of the fuel place.
No, but I remember we did years ago when we were looking at the waste site at the Oyster Bend development on the east side. But if I might, just to set the stage, if you don't mind, Joe, I can read the summary of the Harbor Commission's recommendations. And the commission, sorry.
Excuse me, Joe. It was an item that I brought up. Could we have just a little explainer, because if the public's listening, as to what the Harbor letter, why it was written, but also the reason why this item is on the agenda, and then I'll follow with what Jeff says, because it's also has to do with historic contaminated sites. And so I have a motion after we're done talking.
Go ahead, Jeff.
All right, I might just say that the Harbor Management Commission informed the Planning and Zoning Commission that the Harbor Management Commission is not able to make a favorable recommendation concerning the proposed POCD amendment for the reasons described in more detail in the letter. I won't go over the whole letter, including the intended significant reduction of the Water Street Marine Commercial Zoning District, the lack of consideration of Norwalk's state-approved municipal coastal program, and the intended increase in multifamily residential development in the coastal floodplain, contrary to basic principles of floodplain management and resiliency planning. And Bill, would it be possible for me to share my screen? And I don't.
Yes, go ahead, Jeff.
Let's see if I can do this. Let's see. Well, I have a whole bunch of, can you see this photo? Is it?
Yeah, there it is.
Well, I mean, there are a number of photos that we've assembled just by doing a newspaper search of flooding and Water Street. So this is not a scene that's that unusual. I think this was the December 2022 event. Here's another one. I have the dates of all these, and these photos are all from the Norwalk Hour, the Nancy on Norwalk publication, and also from the Norwalk Police Department's Facebook page. I won't spend too much time here, but as you can see, this is a state road. I'll stop that for a second. But just for background, it's clear that that's an area that's subject to frequent and significant tidal flooding. And that's one of the reasons that the commission felt that it's not consistent with good resiliency planning to think about increasing the residential density in that area. And then the other aspect of our concern was the proposed reduction by essentially half of the area of the marine commercial zoning district in that area. So that's just for background. And then I know that there's also been discussion about that waterfront industrial study and the extent to which it does or does not recognize that there are may be contaminated sites on or near the waterfront. And we're all familiar with the site again up at the Oyster Bend development across from Oyster Shell Park. If you remember, that's the area, Joe, where we had I think you had the photos of the barrels that were buried there years ago. It was a barrel cleaning business. And if you recall, there was a proposal to cap that site some years ago. And the Harbor Commission and the Shellfish Commission and others were concerned that the bulkhead should also be replaced, because you may be able to cap the top of it, but we couldn't be certain that there wasn't spillage through the bulkhead. And in fact, there were known PCBs, I believe, in the site itself, and there were also PCBs found in the river. And at first, so our concern was it cap the top of the site, but if the bulkhead is still porous, there could still be transmission of pollutants through the bulkhead. And if you remember that at first the owner or the applicants argued that the PCBs in the river were not associated with the site. But at one point in our discussions, if you remember, the EPA required the owner of the property to do a test. There is some, I don't understand all the science of it, but there is a test that they could relate the PCBs found in the site to the PCBs found in the river. And when EPA required that test, as we recall, then the applicant dropped its plans for the capping of the site. So as far as we're aware, that site still exists and has not been capped. But that's just an example, and I'll stop talking.
Yeah, Jeff, as far as I know, as far as I remember, that site has condominiums that were built on it. And they were told they had to remediate it, and they decided not to, but they put the condominiums up for sale at an incredible price. I had a friend that had a relative that figured he could get waterfront property dirt cheap, and didn't realize the fact that there was contamination in the soil and that they might be responsible for paying for mitigation, if all the properties were sold. Mm-hmm. And that's the last I heard from him. So I don't know what happened after that.
Well, my recollection is they dropped the proposal after EPA was going to require them to evaluate the PCBs on the property against the PCBs that were found in the river. Yep.
Diane?
This is Diane. Yeah. So this site is, as Jeff said, one of many sites that still have questions as to the existence or absence of contamination. That particular site, with its history and pictures, I found my background in around 2008 when I was leading the League of Women Voters at the time when they did issues. Now they just do voter education. We joined up with the Eastern Norwalk Neighborhood Association, and we requested that the state of Connecticut come down because the owner, through their consultant, had requested what is known as the capping of, which is known as engineered controls. And there was a very well documented, I have background information that I am assembling still. in my files that is a July 1st of 2008, when DEP and the EPA from the remediation section were down to review, and there was a public information session, and I and others spoke. I have a lot of the background information. The health department was aware of this. The council Health and Safety Committee, which is what it was called at that time, had several discussions at my request for several months related to the site. And it is my understanding that the owner's consultant started digging and hit so many barrels that are still remaining in the site that they told the DEP, and they were supposed to put together a cleanup plan. The DEP, through one of their senior officers, was working with the EPA, and there's documentation of this. And long story short is, unfortunately, that particular person, Douglas Zimmerman, died of a heart attack suddenly. It was a shame. But other people took his place. It appears to be something that has fallen through the cracks. And it is just one of those sites. It's a privately held site, but it is one of the sites that the city should have just, flag it in some way. I'm not saying they list it in the study, but right now, the industrial waterfront zone study still contends on page 44, and I did send all of you a copy of the draft study on page 44 out of 187 pages. They still contend that at this time there are no, they keep calling them brownfield sites. And unfortunately, for the staff to continue to state this, I will now list, just generally and quickly, there are other types of lists that a professional due diligence includes in a typical phase 1 site assessment, and also any kind of assessment of whether the existence or absence of a contaminated site happens. This is what I worked on. This is my specialty. It includes brownfields and urban sites. That's one particular program that has particular list. There's the property transfer program. There's the voluntary remediation program. There's the state Superfund program. There's the federal Superfund program. There's the RCRA, which is Resource Conservation Recovery Act Closure and Corrective Action Program and list. All of these have lists. There's the Underground Storage Tank Cleanup Program. There's the Significant Environmental Hazard Program. So all of these have lists that are generated. And the staff and UTIL, who is the consultant that put together the Industrial Waterfront Zone Land Use Study, keep insisting and referring incorrectly to all contaminated sites being called brownfields. It is incorrect term of art, and professionally speaking, it is just one list. And it is a list that is very narrow in its scope. That is why when we're ready, and I'm not saying we're ready to do this, I want to make a motion about us revisiting. We ask the Planning and Zoning and the Mayor's Office to put this study on hold unless and until we have a meeting to talk about the two issues that were just recently discussed by myself and Jeff. And I, unfortunately, and I apologize, due to all kinds of issues, I just sent the general outline of what this motion would be. But I do want to say that, and I list two other sites, the Pepco site off of Water Street, and the current Yankee Gas site, which is off of Commerce and Harbor Avenue. It's an old coal gasification plant used at the turn of the century, and they left a lot of the coal tar. And coal tar, while it doesn't have a tendency to move, it can leach into the water when certain chemicals are used above it.
So any questions? Now, when I sent a letter to Planning and Zoning, and mentioning this, I got pushback. As Diane mentioned, the only thing they cited was checking into the EPA, and that was it. They did not check into the DEEP or any of the other organizations or programs that are out there to remediate issues. So,
Joe,
Diane, go
Joe,
ahead.
in due respect, they called the wrong, they limited who they called, and a proper due diligence that could have been done by UTIL is to literally go to those offices and literally touch the old files that are there if you look, if you know what to look for. But they keep requesting the brownfields list. That is just one of many lists. So of course, EPA sent them to the brownfields program. But there are other programs, so there are a lot of other lists that have to do with Norwalk's industrial legacy. And so that is why it is very useful to have a dialogue face-to-face with the city, because they are they are limiting their scope. It is too narrow, not professionally clarified, and not informing the public and the layman officials who are going to use this study for future plans. There also are grants available to private landowners where the city can partner with them to allow them and help them get these sites cleaned up. That's why the city needs to be more realistic in relating or explaining existence. I'm not even saying that the study needs to list specific sites, but right now they're stating there are no sites because they had such a limited scope in their inquiry.
Correct.
Really, you know what I'm saying? So the EPA Brownfields group may have been talked to, but brownfields are a specially defined entity. It doesn't include groundwater infiltration. There are lots of different programs that were never looked at in order for UTIL's report and Mr. Kleppin's insistence that there are no known listed sites. He's looking at far too few lists. He's looking at one list. And I'm very familiar with the list he's referring to because when Richard Moshe was the mayor, I was actually on the city's brownfields committee. That's when redevelopment agency had to form a committee of citizens, and myself and the health department was involved through Mr. Callahan. And they hired a company named VHS, very good company, but they had a very limited scope as well. They were just looking for sites mostly in South Norwalk. So they didn't look at all the sites throughout the city. And then they just filed an application for a grant for one site. And so that is kind of misinformation that they looked thoroughly at.
Diane, let's stay focused on what we're dealing with here.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else on the potential zoning changes? And Jeff?
Just say that certainly don't disagree with the comments that Diane has made, but even should the report be amended or added to add the additional information that we think is appropriate on the contaminated sites, that still would not change the Harbor Commission's finding with respect to the proposed the support for the proposed development in the coastal floodplain, or the proposed additional density development in the coastal floodplain, or the
Right.
reduction of the marine commercial district.
Oh, absolutely, Jeff.
So-
It just piles on to the reason they should not go forward with these plans.
I think that's the key thing, not that they can go forward if the committee and the commission would have no objections to it going forward if they address these remediation and contamination issues. There's more to it than that.
No,
Right.
I agree that I'm not saying that contamination. So I wanted to make a motion.
Go ahead.
Okay. I sent a draft to everyone. I'm sorry it was late, but I'll read it. The Water Quality Committee recognizes that land use planning and regulations are connected to water quality matters in multiple ways. We recognize the waterfront does and has remained a vital asset. The land use study contains many valuable details, but two major items are in need of attention and amendment. And then I just go on, the Water Quality Committee shall write a letter to the Mayor's Office and Planning and Zoning to request that the industrial waterfront zone land use study adoption be rejected and placed on hold until the following matters are discussed with this committee and others and amended. Number one, the contaminated sites in the study area. And number two, to support the letter that written by the Harbor Commission related to the question of development within the floodplain and reduction of future marine district expansion.
Is that your motion, Diane?
Yes,
I'll second that.
open. Thank you. Open to friendly amendments.
Jeff,
The one item I would add, where Diane mentioned two major items need attention, I would modify that to say two major
Great.
items in addition to the items previously identified by the Harbor Management Commission need attention.
Well, the Harbor Management letter identifies issues, right?
it's the Harbor
I
Commission.
just said it again, so it doesn't imply that there are just two major items that need attention. I say two major items in addition to the items identified by the Harbor Management Commission. That's my suggestion.
That's the two issue. Maybe issues is a better word.
But Diane, there's more than two issues.
There's more than two issues.
And I don't think, I know I'm personally in favor of every issue they point out and brought forward. And I would hate to limit them to two.
Oh, no, I know that, but maybe in number two, it supports all of the items listed in the letter written by Harbor Commission. Would that be
That's it.
better to your liking? Yeah.
Yes,
Joe,
Yeah.
just as an aside, are they still planning to put the school in Hudson Bailey?
well, let's keep that
Yeah.
out of the issue right now. Dick,
That's a part of the zoning.
Steve,
Yeah, I'll second the edit, Mr. Chairman.
okay. All in favor of the edit? Say aye.
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 I
Okay, so you got that, Diane?
Yes, Joe, what I would like to do is work with you to wordsmith, based upon what we just discussed, just wordsmith it for your signature
Okay,
when we're done in the next week or so.
sounds good. Dick,
Okay, thank you.
Dick, what did you want to bring out about the school?
Is the plan still afoot to put the school there?
As far as I know, yes.
That's floodplain, correct?
Part of it is floodplain, and the thing is, they didn't admit that until after they purchased it. Now they want to purchase 6 other sites, and tonight it's going as we speak. There are committees looking at this to approve purchase of 6 additional households and lots to expand the property. So,
Might I share my screen just quickly, if I can do that, Bill?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Just, this is a part of the FEMA flood insurance rate map. And you can see
Oh, great.
the extent of the 100-year coastal floodplain in the Water Street area, not only between Water Street and the shore, but inland of Water Street. And the base flood elevation is 12 feet in that area. I forget what the road elevation is, but it's a substantial identified coastal floodplain. And this I just cut this out of the larger map, but elsewhere the 100-year floodplain extends along the Upper Harbor shoreline and also in part of the area between the Stroffolino and the I-9 and the railroad bridge. So the extent of that floodplain is of the flood hazard
Oh,
area is
Yeah,
substantial.
unfortunately, Jeff, that doesn't show where Hatch and Bailey is.
Oh, I know, I didn't do it specifically for that, but I believe only a portion of the Hatch and Bailey site, and I have to confirm this, is within the floodplain. But
Right.
access to it is through roads that are in the floodplain.
Oh, absolutely.
That's correct. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, in fact, Jeff, back in the 70s, I can't remember which year, there was a bad storm and it blew manhole covers off of the streets along that major street leading into Hatch and Bailey, as well as different parts of Rowayton and everything else. And there was a tremendous amount of backflow, and hopefully DPW has that figured out so that they don't, they put in valves or whatever to protect the backflow, but it was pretty bad. And it was not a serious storm, but flood levels rose, and it was only during storm surge, and that was it. Okay, anything else before we move on? Okay,
Thank you.
the other hot issue right now is Route 7 and the Merritt interchange. The state and local communities want to add more entrances and exits to the Merritt to go into Route 7. There was no mention in the initial write-up that was sent out on the impact on the Silvermine River and the Norwalk River. And there was also no mention, I never saw the word watershed in there. And that's of concern for water quality, if nothing else. So, did all of you get a copy of that information? Jeff?
Again, the risk of talking too much, we did miss the deadline for submitting public comments on.
I didn't miss
Oh,
it.
you
I
did.
sent one out.
I shouldn't say that, the Harbor Commission did, and I think
Okay.
the Shellfish Commission also, on the environmental impact review for the project. And it's quite interesting. As you know, the Harbor Commission, one of the best projects it's accomplished, I think, was, and this took many years of work with the DOT, was to influence the DOT's plans to put stormwater management design elements into the I-95 bridge and also into the I-95 roadway, where the roadway drains into the harbor. And you can see, well, it's completed now, but that commuter parking lot on the east side of the I-95 bridge includes subsurface, what do you call it? Subsurface containers or areas to capture stormwater. That was a major accomplishment, which DOT initially, going back to the completion of phase 1 of the dredging project, had objected to doing. If you remember, the DOT's argument was that public safety was paramount, and they had to get the stormwater off the bridge as quickly as they could. But it did turn out that they could put measures into the bridge, and they ended up with drains that captured, I think, the runoff from 80% of the bridge area. Now, all the work that we did on that was with the understanding that that would serve as a model for other highway infrastructure in terms of drainage improvements. But when you looked at, and again, not a fairly quick review of the environmental document for the I-95 Merritt Parkway and Route 7 project, they didn't identify highway pollutants of the sort that come out off of automobiles and run off the road surface, as we eventually did for the I-95 bridge. And they didn't talk about capturing highway pollutants or improving the existing stormwater conditions that will certainly be exacerbated by the addition of additional impervious road surfaces. As we look through that, the mention of mitigation for stormwater had to do with the DOT's assertion that they would mitigate to the extent practicable any adverse impacts on the existing impairments in the Norwalk River that are related to sedimentation and siltation. But there was no discussion of the capture of highway pollutants in stormwater. And this has a direct impact, even though it's upstream of the harbor. This is the reason why there was a watershed initiative that was established, and because that what goes into the river upstream of the harbor ends up in the harbor. I know the Norwalk River Watershed Association did write a comment letter. You did, Joe, but the Harbor Commission was not able to get it on its agenda in time to act on it at a regular meeting. And now I think we'll have to figure out the best way to influence the permitting process, which is necessary to build this structure. But clearly, this is a major impact in the watershed that has a significant impact, potentially significant impact downstream. But that's my background to this. I'll try to find out what the permitting process is going to be with DEEP and with any other entities, and try to influence this and hold DOT to what it's already determined, that you can put these stormwater mitigation design features into highway improvements, which they should have done here.
And Jeff, I think the first thing they have to recognize is they are impacting watersheds.
Yeah.
And there's no recognition of that.
Joe?
Anything else on that? Diane?
Joe?
Yeah.
Yeah, a great discussion. I very much appreciate it. And I do think this oversight is so stark that I do believe, even with the help of, first just pulling together a group again with a letter to the DOT and the governor's office, if copy, and maybe with the help of Senator Duff, or there are several state reps that I think would be interested in making sure the DOT amends their plans. We could just explain that many entities in the summer were busy and missed the deadline. But what Jeff says is right on target. And also, I'd like to know what the Norwalk River Watershed Initiative may have said, since that is one of the reasons we all, I know I was involved and Jeff was and others, Louise is, a lot of us were. So it's a good point to make, and I think it is important to have something in writing about all of these issues. I just wanted to lastly say that during the last leg of the current Super 7, as a resident, I spoke at the DOT hearing and stated that because of the nature of the drainage, that there needed to be the potential, if there are groundwater resources that could be impacted because of drainage, there should be special attention paid to containing spillage from the roadways and the ramps due to the nature of the groundwater below. I have to check and see if the first taxing district, I don't think that their area reaches that far north, but I'm not sure. I have to look at it. But there may be private wells nearby that could be impacted. So these are the types of things that DOT has an environmental division. They're supposed to handle it. So all of your points are well taken.
Thank you. Okay, next item, climate change, heat, and water quality. And Diane, you put in a request. Is there anything specifically you wanted to address? And do you want to address it, or do you want input?
Okay, I just wanted to put it on the table for the near future, is that one of our roles, the way I read it, is to offer our mayor and the city resources related to the role that climate change is making on water quality and quantity. And so possibly in the future, at least once before the end of the year, the possibility of a webinar or a display at City Hall information just given out through an entity that we can identify later, so that the Mayor's Water Quality Committee shows and can help other departments and commissions participate together in handling this urgent crisis. That's all I wanted to say. Is anyone interested in that?
Well, I'm happy to help provide information. I mean, it's what I did for quite a few years.
Right.
How it's set out and how it's put out, that I think we have to discuss. Okay,
Definitely.
anything else? Okay. Are there any public comments?
I don't see anyone raising their hands.
Okay. Below, I attached all of the minutes from the last meeting. Any amendments to the minutes? Or is everybody somewhat happy with it?
Somewhat.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, can I have a motion to accept the minutes?
Propose a motion to accept the minutes.
That's one. And Jeff, is that a second?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
I will abstain, Mr. Chairman.
Pardon?
I will abstain. I wasn't on the meeting. I had technical trouble.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Okay, then the next step is adjournment. Our next meeting is October 5, 2023. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Okay, Steve has a motion to adjourn. Second, Jeff second, and Dick is second, so we can split that.
Mhm.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Diane, we'll get together
Yes.
and work through that information to be sent out.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Then we're adjourned.
Thank you,
Steve, I'll,
Jim.
Thank you.
I'll see you in 25 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay cool.
Good night, everyone.
Good night now.
Night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Joe?